The story this week is not a bigger model. It is what we are now willing to let the models actually do. Mistral gave search itself an agent that can open documents and check its own answers before it replies. Binance handed AI agents the keys to trade real money on the world's largest crypto exchange. Meta pushed its assistant off the web page and onto your Mac desktop, watching whatever is on screen. Underneath all of it, NVIDIA put the price of the compute needed to run this era at around $600 billion. We start with Mistral, where search just grew a brain. Mistral launched Agentic search today, and the idea behind it is a genuine shift in how retrieval works. Most systems today grab the top handful of matching chunks and answer straight from them, mistakes and all. Agentic search instead lets the model open a document, jump to the right section, and read before it commits to an answer. On a benchmark of questions about financial filings, that loop roughly tripled correctness from 27% to 86%. It did that while cutting token consumption by up to a third, so the more careful method was also the cheaper one. Mistral's own line is that as models get better at reasoning, retrieval improves without touching the infrastructure at all. Search itself is finally becoming an agent, and that quietly changes every retrieval stack built in the last 2 years. Over at OpenAI, the pitch this week was privacy. OpenAI began testing something it calls private safety processing, aimed squarely at customers who worry about their data. Normally, catching misuse means a human somewhere can eventually read what you typed, and that is the tension it targets. Here, the monitoring is done by an agent that watches for abuse patterns across sessions, without a person reading the contents. TechCrunch frames it bluntly, saying the system runs counter to Anthropic's recently announced data retention policy. Anthropic keeps data on its cover models for 30 days so humans can review it under tightly logged access. Privacy has become a competitive weapon between the labs, and that is a far healthier fight than the benchmark wars it is replacing. Meta, meanwhile, want a piece of your desktop. Meta shipped a Mac app for its assistant today, built around dictation that works system-wide across every application you open. Dictation everywhere is convenient, but it is the second capability that tells you where this is really going. The app can look at whatever is currently on your screen and answer questions about it using Meta's Muse Spark model. That lands it in the same contested territory every other assistant is chasing, the layer that sits on top of the operating system. The assistant is migrating out of the chat box and onto the whole desktop, and whoever owns that layer owns much more than a search query. Then there is Binance, handing agents the trading keys. Binance launched Agent OS, letting AI agents connect straight into its financial infrastructure and place trades on your behalf. This is the largest crypto exchange in the world, with more than 300 million registered users behind it. The safeguard is a sandbox. An agent works inside a sub-account whose withdrawals are blocked by default. Users set the limits themselves, with regular swaps capped at $50,000 a day and smaller ceilings elsewhere. That design is deliberate, and Binance describes it as putting granular access control in the user's hands rather than the agent's. Handing an agent your trading keys is the clearest test yet of how much we trust these systems, and the honest answer today is a sandbox with the withdrawals switched off. Underneath all these agents sits raw compute. NVIDIA laid out a plan this week to lock up land, power, and buildings at a data center site in Portsmouth, Ohio. The framing is the interesting part, because NVIDIA argues the real limit on AI is no longer algorithms or demand. The site starts at 4.25 gigawatts of capacity, which maps to roughly 1.5 million of its GPUs per generation. Across the full plan, NVIDIA puts the compute opportunity through the end of the decade at around $600 billion. In its own words, AI factories are where compute turns energy and data into intelligence, the defining infrastructure of the era. When a chip company starts locking up power plants, the story stops being about models and starts being about the electrical grid. Across the world of open models, the map is being redrawn. Hugging Face published a summer review of the open model world, and two patterns in it are worth sitting with. Start with scale, where Chinese labs set the ceiling, pushing open weights as high as 2.78 trillion parameters. American open models, by contrast, stayed under 130 billion parameters in 5 of the 7 months measured. The other pattern flips that completely because the models people actually download and run in production are the tiny ones. Models under 1 billion parameters take 83% of all downloads, while everything above 100 billion takes just 1. The headline models win the launch week, but the ecosystem actually runs on the small ones nobody writes about. Finally, a question every agent builder is now asking. IBM Research put out a study asking a deceptively simple question: how much memory an AI agent actually needs to do its job? They tested agents on AppWorld, a suite of 585 multi-step tasks across everyday applications. The answer turned out to depend on the model, so there is no single right amount of memory to hand an agent. A smaller model did best with selective memory, gaining 16 points of task completion for only 5% more tokens. A far larger model, by contrast, did better when handed its complete self-written guideline set instead of a filtered slice. IBM's phrase for it is that learning happens around the model, not inside it, tuned like a dose rather than switched on. The interesting frontier is no longer just a bigger model, it is the scaffolding of memory and tools we wrap around the one we already have. Every claim in this roundup is linked to its original source in the panel on screen, so you can read the announcements yourself. If a daily briefing on what actually shipped in artificial intelligence is useful to you, subscribing is what keeps it coming.